Really quickly, I wanted to come on and tell you that this afternoon, once Trump is arraigned, fingerprinted, mugshot, the whole thing, we're going to have a professor of criminal law join me for a live show on our YouTube channel and also Patreon to discuss the specific charges. There could be up to 30 of them, and we're going to have an expert discuss what it is, what they mean, and what that means for a potential sentencing for him going forward. So don't miss that. Stay tuned. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, get over there. They'll be on the Patreon as well, and we'll be able to answer some questions as too from there. So don't miss it. Live show, really big. Trump getting arrested. Can't wait. We will see you there. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Muckrake Political Podcast. I am your host, Nick Hauselman, and today, Jared Yates Sexton is out doing a lot more important things, and he's left me to my own devices. And as a result, I wanted to have a interesting discussion about what's going on in the middle part of America, in a place that I hold near and dear to my heart since I went to the University of Wisconsin. And I'm pleased to have on the show as a guest Lew Friedland, who is a professor emeritus in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and is very active politically in what's going on there. So, Lew, thank you so much for being on the show. And I think there's some really important things that you need to talk to us about.
Yeah, absolutely. This Supreme Court race, I'm guessing by now almost every one of your listeners knows this, but this is, it's a cliche, but it's true. This is the most important race in the country right now, for sure. I think it's important for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is that our Supreme Court in 2020 came within one vote of giving our electoral votes to Donald Trump. The Supreme Court was the only one in the country to consider overturning the results of the election. If this election goes to the conservative tomorrow, he was an attorney for the fake election slate. So that gives you an idea of what's going to happen in 2024. So folks who aren't from Wisconsin should understand that the 2024 presidential election is in many ways on the line tomorrow, as well as what happens in our state.
Well, hang on for a second, because I think that most people are under the impression that the crazies on January 6th had a lot of fake notions of electors and fraudulent votes. We put that away. Democracy survived. Everything is great. How can you tell me that there's still a state out there that might actually be able to have this scheme come true? And by the way, it sounds a bit unique. It doesn't sound like what happened in Arizona or they tried to do in Pennsylvania. Well, I'm still confused. How is this possible?
Well, it's possible because the Republican Party in Wisconsin, ever since 2011, has been stripping the state of democratic rule, really, again and again and again. And we are the bellwether. We are a state where there's progressive majorities. We've elected Democratic governors, Democratic attorney general, one Democratic senator. I wish it was two in the past several elections. So there's, we have the votes on a statewide basis. But to give you one example, our assembly, we have the most gerrymandered state in the United States, literally the worst in the United States, even though we're a northern state. And in 2018, 55% of people voted for Democrats in state assembly races. They got 33 seats out of 99. So that'll give you a sense of the state. The state of our state is radically skewed to the right. That's the short answer.
Yeah, and it's weird because having gone there, it was a bastion of liberalism for a long, long time, coming out of the 60s. But I suppose you can get a little bit of a distorted view of that if you stay around, Madison or Milwaukee. I suspect once you get out of those areas, you get into the wooded areas, I suppose, rural, which probably looks maybe similar to like what Michigan looked like when you're talking about people who were plotting to kidnap the governor.
Yeah, I mean, there were actually Wisconsinites who were part of that plot to kidnap the Michigan governor. So literally that's true. That said, it's important to understand, and it's complicated, for folks on the coast who live in, largely blue states. I don't think they actually understand the middle of the country very well. We have cities here. So if you get outside, you're right. But if you get outside of Madison and Milwaukee, you have Green Bay. That's the third largest city. It's got a Democratic mayor. You ever seen Kenosha, Beloit, Sheboygan, and I could go on, right? These are Democratic cities. And so it's a patchwork state like most states in the United States are. But because most states in the United States, even blue ones, skew somewhat to the rural areas, that means that legislative politics in particular in all states, but especially in swing states like ours, skew to the right much more than the actual center of public opinion in our states.
Well, can you walk us through a little bit about? You mentioned it was one vote away. Basically, it's a 4-3 majority right now. On the Supreme Court right now, it's actually tilted toward the conservatives, right?
Absolutely, yeah, no, definitely.
And so, what was the case that was brought in 2020 for the national election for the presidential?
It was whether our Supreme Court would hear the case about fake electors, essentially the case to replace the duly elected Joe Biden electors with a fake and illegal set of Trump electors. And they were fake and they were illegal. And there's a 4-3 conservative majority. One conservative justice voted not on substantive grounds, but on procedural grounds. Like he said, they filed the petition too late. So that's how close we came to entertaining a fake elector scheme. And if that court had entertained that fake elector scheme, if they admitted it in the first place, there's a pretty good chance that they would have gone ahead and said, okay, fake electors, we're going to flip Biden's electors. And that a lot of things could have happened if that happened, none of them good, including a cascade of other states. It would have delegitimized the entire election. I mean, it would have it's hard to imagine worse chaos than we were in at that time, but I think it could have actually made things even worse than they were.
I'm actually trying to look up how many electoral votes Wisconsin has, because you're talking about a bit of the cascade. Because in my mind, I'm saying, okay, great. Wisconsin gives how many electoral votes are there? Do you know?
11.
So 11 wouldn't necessarily, swing an election. It could, but it doesn't. I don't think it has been that close for a while. So what the cascade is interesting. Do you think that this would then be the template for, the states that we've already seen from 2020? We willing to get closer to this as well and use that as a way to overturn the election?
Absolutely. I think it would have been the template. This is a thing to remember. Wisconsin's anti-democratic practices, and I mean small d anti-democratic practices, this has been a laboratory for the far right, for the Koch brothers and allies since 2011. They rolled back right to work here. They destroyed unions in this state when this was one of the strongest union states in the union. They destroyed the teachers union. They defunded the universities. They defunded public education. They stripped the DNR, the environmental agency of the state, of its regulatory power. This was the laboratory for almost everything. This was Trumpism before the fact. They tried it all out here, and it wasn't an accident, because once they got that gerrymandered legislature, and Scott Walker's a Republican governor in 2010, they said, well, we're not, this is a license to do whatever we want, regardless of public opinion. So they've been going full tilt until 2018, when Governor Tony, who's a Democrat, was elected, which was the first fire break. But it's sort of been a holding action for the last 4 years. It's sort of, we have the veto. The last thing they did, by the way, when Walker was defeated, was to strip the governor of his power and the attorney general. So they said, well, you've freely elected a Democratic governor and attorney general, so let's just take away their power before they take office. So that was again, the icing on the cake. So yeah, this has been a template for the rest of the country. What happens here spreads to other places, unfortunately. And on the other hand, if the progressive forces win the election tomorrow, win the Supreme Court election, one of the first things that's going to come before that new court is a case around gerrymandering. if the back is broken of that gerrymander, then all of a sudden we have a fair fight in Wisconsin again. And I think in a fair fight, it'll take a little while, but I think we'll claw back democracy and reestablish democracy in this state.
You know, it's a little bit soul killing to think that a Supreme Court justice could simply be a rubber stamp for one way or the other, and it definitely feels that way. I think they've been exposed on the Supreme Court of the land. It certainly has. We've been exposed to that now, and it frustrates me to hear that, where you're saying like we simply have to get someone who's backed by Democrats, quote unquote, to have that seat so that it can actually have sort of a fair judgment on these cases. Especially because actually it's interesting is are all states, I'm going to plead ignorance for a second. I don't know if all states do an election for Supreme Court justices in each state. Is that right?
No, they do not. It varies state by state, and I think it's a minority. I'm pretty sure, and I'm not an expert on this, I should be really clear, but I think it's a minority of states that elect their Supreme Court judges. Mm-hmm. And, the problem is that if we still lived in a normal, fair, democratic, small d democratic society, that would be okay. People every 10 years elect a Supreme Court justice, and it balances out over the long run, and maybe a little more conservative or maybe a little more liberal. But it would be that worked in Wisconsin for a long time, right? The court was somewhat more liberal when I first got here in the 80s and 90s, and it drifted to the right, but not extreme right. But over starting around 2010, it started drifting to the extreme right. And so, yeah, that's the problem. When one side stops playing by the rules, it incentivizes the other side. I mean, I am a Democrat, surprise, but I don't think the Dems have stopped playing by the rules, but it forces you to kind of say, okay, if you're gonna gerrymander the state so badly that in the U.S. Supreme Court says the only way that can be overturned is by your state Supreme Court, then we're gonna have to fight like hell to get a court that'll overturn that gerrymander. And it's not. I don't think it's ideal. I agree with you, Nick. I would rather have more neutral courts, but unfortunately, we don't.
Yeah. I mean, I remember even being there in the early 90s, and the mayor of Madison was who had gone there and was part of the movement in the 60s. I think, started cracking down on like parties for underage drinking in houses and like distinctly, non-progressive things. Right. And I remember even then hearing people complain, like the specific memory I have would be, about how Bill Clinton didn't win the majority of votes in 92, and now he's representing the whole country. And this sort of, if Paul Ryan was probably, he didn't go to Madison, but he was basically that template was, around, and that right. Must have been continuing to grow from then straight to 2010. And you're not talking out of turn when you say you have a kind of a specific area you can point to, or a year you can point to when this became the breeding ground. I believe they have evidence. Don't they have like emails that really confirmed that this was the gerrymandering that they did was what the Republican Party overall in the country was?
Oh, absolutely. There's a great book by a guy named David Daley, good, really fine journalist. I don't know if I can say this on a podcast, but the title is Rat Effed.
Oh, you can say it. We said worse.
I can't. And we talk about because I love. No, Rat Fucked is the name of the book, and it basically the GOP nationally. It was Karl Rove, George Bush's brain, as he was sometimes called, who was the brains behind Project Red Map. That's what it was called. And for the first time, the Repubs figured out into the Democrat. I mean, I still think the Dems were several steps behind, and I take that responsibility. Right, that was stupid. But they figured out, hey, we now have these computers. We can draw maps so that we can maximize our advantage literally to the house, and there are streets where they've divided Sheboygan. Used to be one district, and one side of the streets in one district, one side's the other. They maximized that map. And then they said that they were dancing. One of the Republican aide, we know this because Todd Albaugh was an aide to one of the Republicans in that room, and they were dancing, and they said the Democrats will never win an election again in this state. College students won't be able to vote. They were just laughing happy about it. So there's no mystery to it. It's not speculation and it's not finger pointing. It's documented.
So
Yeah.
we spend a lot of time, or I do at least, trying to sort of understand from the other point of view, like what is going on here and why they would be, so willing to go against what clearly is a majority of the opinion in Wisconsin. I don't know if you have an answer to that. I mean, generally what we come up with is that they are convinced that their policies, no matter how unpopular they might be, will be so great for everybody. You will see that it's worth risking violating our democracy just to get them in, so that everybody eventually will then enjoy the benefits of these things.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose some of them probably do see it that way. I think others are just more cynical. They know they're a minority. They know their policies are unpopular. People don't like voucher schools. I think 74%, 5% of the people in the state support, relatively free access to abortion. 66% of the people in the state are against the gerrymander. There's no mystery where the public stands on these policies. And the Republican Party knows that. And they say, well, we can only enforce these through this radical minority rule. Only if we strip away the right of people to actually democratically elect their electors, elect their representatives, one person, one vote. That's the only way we're ever going to win. And they want to stay in power. They're a party of, Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, which is the big business lobby in the state, is pouring money into Dan Kelly, the conservatives campaign. They're running like ads that are just out and out lies. They charge, they said that Protasiewicz, the progressive candidate, they said that she had sentenced a rapist, and the victim was upset and was in tears. Well, the woman who was the victim in that rape, came out and said, no, she was a good judge. She did a fair job, and she was happy with the sentence. And and they were lying. And she said that the Kelly and the Republicans supporting him had re-traumatized her by dragging her name out against her will. They didn't take the ad down, right? So I saw it. They were supposed to. They acknowledged that it was wrong. But then I was sitting in a bar just before, a couple hours ago with a friend, and I saw that on the air. So it's bare knuckles, man. It's raw power. If we lose power, we're going to lose power, and we're going to do everything we can to keep it. I think it's almost that simple.
Well, before we get into the state of what the race is, because I know we're on the precipice of having the actual vote, all of the votes being tabulated. You mentioned abortion as another issue that I think will be coming up. Tell us a little bit more about what's going on with that, because it's interesting. And I just had Michaela Cavanaugh on the show in Nebraska, who is filibustering the entire Senate so they can't get anything done. And what was interesting about that is she's advocating for trans rights, but it turns out there's a whole host of other things they were trying to pass that her filibustering is stopping. And I'm kind of curious if there's a laundry list here in Wisconsin as well, starting with abortion.
Well, abortion is, as you can imagine, now after Dobbs, one of the key issues in the state. We now live under this is hard to believe, but it's true. After the Dobbs decision in the Supreme Court repealing the right to abortion, we now live under an 1849 abortion law. So our laws reverted back to an 1849 law. If Dan Kelly wins, the conservative tomorrow, that law will be upheld. So we will be going literally back to 1849 in this state. Well, I shouldn't say we will be. We are back to 1849 right now. Janet Protasiewicz, the progressive, has said that she absolutely stands behind a woman's right to choose. And well, of course, there's literally no case in front of her signaling pretty clearly that she will vote to repeal, to override that law if it comes before her. So abortion is absolutely on the line. There's no question about it. In fact, Dan Kelly today, Monday, the day before the election, is flying around the state in a private jet paid for by major anti-abortion advocates. But he says he's not political, right? So, so abortion is absolutely on the line. And, you know, this is a state with a strong conservative culture, honestly, outstate, and not only, even in Milwaukee, strong Catholic culture, strong right to life movement. And it, you know, it's, I disagree with it, but it, you know, some people come by it, I guess, honestly, in that sense. So it's not clear what will happen on the abortion issue, but right now the wind appears to be at the back of the pro-choice side.
Okay, that's good. And what is the state of the race right now? Are there polling numbers for Supreme Court elections?
There are none. There aren't. It's actually driving me crazy, to be perfectly honest. I know Charles Franklin, who's the best pollster in this state, and I wander by him and say, Charles, please poll. But they're not polling. He's not polling, and his poll is the only one I would trust anyway, to be honest. There's private polls. There was a GOP poll that showed Protasewicz up by 2 points, and usually their polls skew anything from 3 to 5 points in their own favor, so that would suggest that Protasewicz is in the mid to high single digits. I know that's totally speculative. That's making an on-the-fly adjustment, but even their own poll shows her up too. Now that's too within the margin of error. I'm sure, I haven't seen it, but I'm sure that's within the margin of error. So the GOP poll, the one poll we've seen, there's some other polls, some private polls on the progressive side that suggest that Protasewicz is in the high single digits. Protasewicz has outraised Kelly prodigiously. The last time I looked, and I haven't looked at the very most recent numbers, it was about 5-1, which is unbelievable. That's rare, because Republican billionaires have been pouring money into Kelly's race too. But Protasewicz has one advantage, which is that this is a little bit in the weeds, but if a candidate buys airtime, he or she buys it on the lowest available rate, meaning the cheapest rate. If a PAC buys airtime, they can pay 2, 3, 4 times as much. So because Janet's buying her own time and Kelly's buying basically PAC money, PAC monies are buying his time, even that 5-1 fundraising advantage is even magnified further if you compare on a ratings point by ratings point basis. So we dominate in the fundraising, we dominate in the over the air, you know, again, if you look at that as an indicator, usually that's an indicator that the side who dominates in those two areas is going to win, but we'll know tomorrow. I can say that early voting results are strong in Dane County. Dane County, this is where Madison is, where you went to school, of course, but other folks may not know that. Dane County is the Democratic powerhouse of this state. We have huge turnouts usually, and they tend to be 80-85% Democratic, which is amazing. So if Dane County turnout is as high as it looks like it's going to be, then that's a good sign too.
Well, you know, we saw an audit funded by the state that sounded like a complete and utter ridiculous waste of money and time, right? And nothing ever came out of that. And I'm curious if there's a concern that if Protasewicz wins, you know, is there going to be a muddled, result here where they're going to try and either contest that election or somehow be able to obscure what really happened in the race?
Well, that's a great question, and of course the answer is I don't know what their plans are. They have, in past races, there's documents that have emerged that show that they were going to claim that the vote was fraud even before the election. So again, that Trump playbook has been tried here in the past. Will they do it again? I wouldn't surprise me. Now, Kelly lost once before. Kelly lost in 2020. He was appointed by Scott Walker and he got beat straight up in 2020. So he's a loser. even the GOP actually knows he's a loser. But people behind closed doors anonymously say, you know, why are we nominating this guy who already got beat just 2 years ago? So it's going to be hard for them to claim if Janet wins that it was not legitimate. But, you know, hey, I wouldn't put it past him, I guess is the only way I can put it.
Right. Well, let's look at it this way. Let's say she wins and you have Governor Evers in charge and you don't have the control. Democrats don't have control of the Senate or the House. But like, so how much of a gridlock are we still stuck with then once that happens?
Plenty of a gridlock. it'll still be a stalemate between the legislature and the governor. It's just that when issues go to the court now, not every issue. I don't think the progressives will be in lockstep necessarily, but things will swing somewhat to the other side. So gerrymandering, abortion, you're likely to see swing in a progressive direction. And right now, in this sort of razor sharp stalemate type situation, that one little difference makes all the difference in policy in the state. The Republicans are also, because of the gerrymander, close to a supermajority in both houses, Senate and the Assembly. If they achieve that supermajority, there's a critical Senate seat up on Tuesday, tomorrow too. If the Republicans win that seat, then they will have a supermajority in the Senate. I believe they're 1 or 2 seats away in the Assembly, so they could just override everything that Evers vetoes, and then hell will break loose.
Well, that doesn't sound. Let's hope that doesn't happen. By the way, is there polling for the Senate seat? Do we have any feeling on what that's going to turn into?
No polls that I know of. I mean, I'm hopeful, but if I'm honest about it, it's a gerrymandered Republican seat. The Democrat running. Her name's Jody Habashinikin. She's running a great campaign, but God, she's probably got a 5-point natural disadvantage. I'm guessing she'll probably come within 2 and running a good campaign, but I would be surprised if she wins. I hope she does, but I'd be surprised.
Well, I have Ben Wickler on my in my feed here, and he sounds, he's been tweeting prodigiously the last week or so about this, and sounds somewhat positive about it. Wickler is the Democratic chair of Wisconsin, and certainly someone you should follow if you want to keep up on this. Lou, where can the good people find you?
I'm on Twitter, but nobody wants to read my Twitter feed, to be honest. I really am a scholar, and I write, and I do things that are more academic. I have a book from Cambridge University called Battleground, Cambridge University Press, with my colleagues, that describes in some depth how we got to this point. And that's probably the best place to find me. Otherwise, I'm just a citizen doing my duty as best as I can.
Well, we often have people on our live shows, and when they listen to our pod, ask us what can people do to help alleviate the situation that we're in across the country. And certainly some of the things that you're doing, just being active and being helpful and keep making sure people understand what these things are, is a really important thing. So I'm glad that you could help, lay that out for us and show us what can be done. And there is a populist movement. There is a power to people getting together and standing up to the abuse of power, right? I
do want to say one thing, that this is not for me or to follow me, but I did in 2020, I organized a group called Win Wisconsin that largely, and I think you know about it, Nick, we were appealing initially to people in California, but eventually it spread to the East Coast as well, to say, look, your state is your state, and we're happy for you, but you can help us out. I would encourage people. You mentioned Ben Wickler. Martha Lanning in 2016 started turning the Democratic Party around in this state. Ben has continued that upward trend. We have a real small D Democratic Party. I know some people aren't always crazy about the Democratic Party, but in our state, it really is a Democratic Party. It's a grassroots party. Ben's done a great job. So I would encourage people, especially out of state, help the purple states, help your purple state brothers and sisters. If it's give to the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, it's a good investment. Even give monthly if you can, even if it's just $10 a month or $20 a month. It makes a huge difference in planning and fighting these fights, because we've been fighting these fights for 12 years now, at least. And, again, I'm a retired citizen. I'd like to be playing music right now, honestly, but we can't quit, because otherwise we're going to lose democracy. And the way to support us is to support, in our case, the Democratic Party, but there's other places to give your money. If it's Arizona, Georgia, depending on Florida, help the people out who need your help.
Well, Lou, thanks so much for laying that out for us and inspiring us to continue to do more and fight for democracy, because you're right. It is as important as anything we're going to face in our lifetime, I imagine. So again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. And we'll keep our fingers crossed and our eyes peeled on the results for tomorrow.
Thank you, Nick. And I'll meet you at the terrace for a beer the next time you're in town.
Absolutely. I will be there.
Okay. Take good care.